This is Zubaz, gaming's ultimate Easter egg. A video game character without a game of his own, a character with a pretty interesting history, and a character who as of this video has made 22 official appearances in various different games. As of this video, it has now been 10 years since he first started showing up in games, so I thought that to mark the occasion, I would ramble on for a couple of minutes about the many appearances of Zubaz. Part 1. History. The story begins sometime in the late 80s/early 90s, when game developer Capcom were making what would go on to become one of the most influential games of all time, Street Fighter II. This title was the birth of what we now think of as a fighting game, and starred many characters who would go on to become industry icons. Now, obviously, Capcom didn't land on these characters immediately. They went through many different designs for potential fighters before settling on these ones. And of those scrap fighters was this guy, a wrestler wielding a rope whip as a weapon who was simply referred to as Bullfighter in the design's notes. And for many years, that's all this character was, just another scrap character concept. That was until roughly 20 years later, when Street Fighter fan Wally Madden found this design and created a character around it. Though at first there wasn't a lot to this character. His name was Zubaz, named after the word on his shirt, and he was given the catchphrase, "Can you feel the storm? It's coming," taken from a line said by Terry Bogard in the Fatal Fury animated film.
Feel the storm, it's coming.
Zubaz became something of an inside joke on the YouTube channel Wally was on at the time, the Super Best Friends, and it was through those inside jokes that the character started to actually grow a fanbase, enough to the point that the character would begin to show up in several video games, where he would begin to get a much more fleshed out backstory and lore. After failing to enter the World Warrior tournament in Street Fighter II, Baz would somehow find a way to travel between worlds, leading to his many different cameo appearances. He also wields the power of the Storm, giving him various storm-based abilities, hence the catchphrase. Due to him constantly being rejected from various fighting tournaments over the years, Baz has developed a sort of inferiority complex, believing that he's just a loser. But despite this, he keeps on getting back up to try again, making him into a sort of larger-than-life kind of character. Now, it's actually unknown whether Baz is the same character in each of these games, or if these are all just similar-looking guys who all happen to share the same name. But the idea that Baz has always been the same character, just hopping from game to game, is generally what fans choose to believe. They usually refer to him as a video game hobo, as he's always looking for a game to call home. So while it's never been stated in-game that these are all the same guy, at this point enough people believe it that they might as well be. Part 2. The sightings. Of Baz's many different appearances, there are two kinds. Games where he just straight up is there, and games where he plays a much more minor role like some kind of cosmetic. The games that he's physically in, there's Dive Kick, a fighting game where he appears as a playable character, Shovel Knight, where he acts as a boss, various other Shovel Knight games including Plague of Shadows, Spectre of Torment, King of Cards, and Shovel Knight Showdown where he's a playable character, Bad Cupid, a dating sim where he's a dateable character, Devil Engine, an arcade-style shooter where he appears in a mech designed after himself as an enemy, Indivisible, an RPG where he's a secret boss, The Takeover, a beat-em-up game where he's a boss, Monster Madness Survival, a Roblox game where he's playable, Petal Crash, a puzzle game where he's an unlockable character, Slipstream, a racing game where he's a selectable driver, Frogun, where he appears as an enemy called Bazbug, I'm guessing his appearance changes depending on the world he's in, like Sora's does in Kingdom Hearts, and lastly, Circus, where he's part of a secret bonus level, shameless plug. Apparently he was also going to appear in Pocket Rumble as a boss, though as far as I can tell this never actually ended up happening. He's also set to appear in Parkour Karte and Helvetii. In the case of the former, he was announced to appear in it back in 2016, though the game itself still hasn't released. I got in contact with its developer, and apparently it's still being worked on, though it's probably still going to be a while before it actually comes out. As for the latter, this did release, though Baz just hasn't come to the game yet. According to its developer, he is still coming, it's just that there wasn't time to add him when making the base game. Hi, Tom from the future here. He was also in a Lisa the Painful fan game. I don't count it because it's unofficial, it's a fan game, but I still figured I'd put it here anyway because it does exist. That's it. For his more minor appearances, there's a lot less. You can choose a Zubaz-themed costume for Beowulf and Skullgirls. You can find a message from Zubug in Hollow Knight that's just his catchphrase. There's a poster featuring him in Clanman. You can wear a Zubaz mask in Bloodstained Ritual of the Night by entering the code Bullfighter. You can use his whip in One Step from Eden. There's apparently a picture of him in Champion of Venus, and the original concept sketch for him is in the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection. It's possible that there might be even more that I just don't know about, so feel free to let me know if there's any that I've missed. Part 3. The other appearances. I think that part of what makes Baz so appealing as a concept is just the sheer confusion that he invokes in players when they see him. They first meet him in one game and just assume that he's the original character created for that game, but then they see him in another game, and then another one, until eventually start to realize that these are all the same character, making them curious as to where he originated. But technically, there is no origin. His first game was Dive Kick, but even that's not really where he came from, and I think that confusion is kinda funny. So what say we make it even more confusing? In Dive Kick, Baz's first in-game appearance, it's stated in his backstory that Baz has been rejected from different kinds of fighting tournaments all his life. Now, obviously, this is the game's way of saying he was rejected from Street Fighter, without actually saying it for legal reasons. But that wording states that he was rejected from several tournaments, implying that he tried to force his way into other games before Dive Kick, but failed. Street Fighter 2 came out in 1991, with Dive Kick releasing in 2013, meaning that theoretically, there's about 22 years of Baz game hopping. This got me thinking. Is it possible that in that time frame, some games came out that featured, say, a background character or an NPC that coincidentally looked like Zubaz? Because if there are, then you could just say that those games were where he was all that time, kinda like the whole Captain Rex in Return of the Jedi situation. I mean, most of Baz's lore is stuff that was never really stayed in game anyway. Him originating from the Street Fighter world, the idea that he can just travel between games and these are all the same guy, no game ever stayed any of this, and yet these are all parts of his character, because the fans chose them to be. My point being that the background characters I'm going to talk about could be Baz if you decide you want them to be. First up, this guy right here in Fatal Fury King of Fighters. This background character shares quite a few similarities appearance-wise. He's got the same build, seems to have blonde hair including a blonde beard, and even wears similar clothing, but it's not the design of this character that's important here. What's specifically important is the game itself. For those who don't know, Fatal Fury was the first fighting game to release after Street Fighter 2, as its director was the same person who directed the original Street Fighter. Outside of the idea that Baz's first appearance after being rejected from Street Fighter was an SNK game being kinda poetic, if Baz was trying to enter other fighting tournaments after Street Fighter 2, then theoretically, this would be the first one he would try to sign up for. Also, his catchphrase, "Can you feel the storm it's coming?" is a line taken from Terry Bogard, Fatal Fury's protagonist. So maybe, while chilling in Southtown, Baz heard Terry say it, thought it sounded cool, and then proceeded to never stop saying it. Now, like I said earlier, there is another unofficial appearance, and that is in Dragon Quest VIII. In the Dragon Quest games, there's a type of NPC called Toughies. Looking at their design, yeah, this does share quite the resemblance to Baz. The only real differences here are the lack of shirt and the additional golden helmet that's covering his face. I could definitely see Baz taking a liking to these guys and deciding to wear their style of armor, much like he did in Plague of Shadows when he dressed up like one of Plague Knight's servants. As for which one specifically I think you could argue is Baz, there's this one cutscene in the game where a toughie is playing cards with another one of the game's characters, something he also did in King of Cards. He loses the match, and much like Baz is prone to do, he throws a fit over it and starts a bar fight where he uses wrestling moves. I'm sure that obviously none of this was ever intentional, but it does strangely all fit together in a weird way. Just like the official appearances, there could be some more that I haven't noticed, so if there's any that you've noticed, let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear them. Part 4. The Future. Baz has been showing up in different games for over 10 years now, or 30 if you count this, and I honestly don't see that stopping. Before I started researching for this video, I felt that Baz had the potential to become almost like to video games what Stan Lee is to Marvel films. But after doing all the research and learning that he's been in 24 different games in just 10 years, with the possibility that he's been in even more, I would argue that if he's not already at that point, then he's not all that far off. Unlike all other crossovers in, well, anything, putting Baz into your game doesn't really require a lot of legal mumbo-jumbo. While he was originally based on a Capcom-created character design, the version of Baz that was designed for Dive Kick and all other games afterwards was made to be just legally distinct enough from that original design to be considered an original character. Also, his name was changed from Zubaz to just Baz, as there's a clothing brand called Zubaz, who have obviously trademarked that name. And the person who created Zubaz the character, Wooly Madden, has gone on record saying that he's fine with anyone using Baz by putting him into their game.
It's exactly what I want. I just want this to be almost like a publicly used, open source piece of garbage character, you know, at this point, because anytime anyone goes, hey, can I put him in? Absolutely, absolutely. Don't even think twice. Put him in your game. Have fun.
So if you're making a game of your own, maybe consider putting Baz in there. He's always looking for a place to stay.